When Jacob returned to the valley where his family had lived for generations, he found something unthinkable. The peaceful land where he had once fished, camped, and dreamed as a child was now buried beneath 40 freshly built homes. Shiny driveways lined the hillsides, manicured lawns sparkled under sprinklers, and proud HOA signs declared authority over the very soil that belonged to him. But the new residents had overlooked one small problem: the dam. A massive structure his grandfather had built decades earlier stood silently upstream, holding back millions of gallons of water. They thought they had stolen Jacob's inheritance. They had no idea he controlled the flow of the valley itself. Jacob Whitmore had grown up listening to his grandfather's stories about the valley. His grandfather, Thomas Whitmore, had been a practical man who believed in preserving the land. Years ago, he had overseen the construction of a dam not just to irrigate crops, but to create balance between human life and nature. Jacob had spent summers walking the dam, his small hands brushing over the cold stone as his grandfather's deep voice echoed in the canyon. When Thomas passed, the land, hundreds of acres, including the dam, became Jacob's inheritance. But Jacob left for the city, chasing a career in engineering, and the valley stood quiet in his absence. He assumed the land would remain untouched, a part of his family's legacy waiting for him. Years slipped by. Then, one day, a letter arrived. It was from an old neighbor, warning Jacob of what had been happening. "They've built homes, Jacob. A whole HOA has moved in. They're acting like they own the place. You need to come back." Confused and enraged, Jacob drove back to the valley. And when he arrived, he couldn't believe what he saw: 40 houses gleaming in the sun, children playing where his grandfather's cattle once grazed, and arrogant HOA leaders walking the land as though they had conquered it. As Jacob stepped out of his truck, he was immediately intercepted by a woman in her 50s, clipboard clutched like a sword. She introduced herself as Karen Williams, the HOA president. "You can't park here," she snapped. "This is private. HOA property." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "Private? This is my land. My grandfather built everything you see around you. These homes shouldn't even exist here." Karen laughed dismissively. "Sir, the HOA purchased this land years ago through the county. Maybe you're confused. If you have complaints, you can file them in writing. Otherwise, you're trespassing." Her words burned. Jacob knew he had never sold the land. Somewhere in the bureaucracy, paperwork had been manipulated, titles shuffled. But Karen's smugness only fueled his anger. "Check your records," Jacob said coldly. "This dam, this valley, it belongs to the Whitmore family. You've built homes on floodplain land without a clue what you've done." Karen rolled her eyes. "We've lived here for years. Nothing has happened and nothing will. If you don't leave, I'll call the cops." Jacob didn't argue further. He turned away, walking toward the dam. Karen's laughter followed him. But she didn't. Understand, this wasn't just land, it was a ticking clock. The dam stood like a sleeping giant, weathered but strong. Jacob ran his hand across the stone, remembering his grandfather's warning. "This dam is the lifeline of the valley. Respect it, and it will protect you. Ignore it, and the water will reclaim what is hers." Over the years, Jacob realized, no one had maintained it. Cracks lined the surface. Moss crept along the base. The HOA had built their homes directly in the floodplain, without considering the danger of being downstream. Jacob opened the control room door. Inside, rusting machinery hummed faintly. The levers, though aged, still functioned. The water behind the dam churned restlessly, as though it had been waiting for him. He stood there for hours, debating. Part of him wanted to give the HOA one last warning. Another part remembered Karen's arrogant smile, the clipboard raised like a weapon, dismissing his claim to his family's land. That night, Jacob sat by the water, staring at the shimmering surface of the reservoir. 40 homes now rested where cattle once grazed. 40 families believed they ruled the valley, but none of them knew that a single pull of a lever could change everything. His grandfather's words echoed again. Respect it, or it will reclaim, Jacob decided. Before making his move, Jacob attended an HOA meeting. He walked into the clubhouse where polished wood floors and expensive lighting tried to project control. Dozens of homeowners sat with crossed arms while Karen stood at the front, smiling, like she owned the valley. "I'm here to give you all one warning," Jacob announced. "These homes are built on my land. Worse, they're built in a floodplain. If the dam gives way, everything you've built will be underwater." The room erupted with laughter and whispers. A man in a suit raised his hand mockingly. "Are you threatening us, sir?" Jacob clenched his fists. "I'm reminding you. Leave now. Take your families, take your belongings, and leave this valley before it's too late." Karen stepped forward, smirking. "Mr. Whitmore, this is ridiculous. You have no authority here. The HOA has lawyers, deeds, and the county's approval. You, on the other hand, have nothing but empty threats. Please leave before we call security." Her words sealed it. Jacob looked around the room, seeing smug faces and shaking heads. No one believed him. No one even considered checking the dam. He turned on his heel and left. If they wanted proof, they would have it. The sky was heavy with clouds the night Jacob returned to the dam. Thunder rolled over the valley as if nature herself was preparing for what was about to unfold. Jacob entered the control room and gripped the main lever. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the choice he was making. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled. At first, nothing. Then a low groan echoed through the stone walls. The machinery shuddered to life. Water, trapped for decades, surged forward, roaring, like a beast set free. Jacob watched from the cliff as the first torrents rushed down the canyon. The floodlights of the HOA community flickered in the distance. Within minutes, streets turned into rivers. Cars floated like toys. Lawns vanished beneath the rushing water. He expected screams, chaos, but mostly, there was silence. Shock hung over the neighborhood as residents stared in disbelief, realizing too late that Jacob had spoken the truth. The valley was returning to what it had always been, a basin, a cradle for the dam's water. By morning, the HOA community was unrecognizable. 40 homes sat broken, drowned in mud and debris. Lawns were torn apart, driveways cracked open. Furniture floated in ruined pools, and shattered glass sparkled under the pale dawn. Helicopters circled above, filming the destruction. News anchors called it a tragedy, though Jacob knew it was inevitability. When officials arrived, they questioned him. He didn't deny it. He explained how the land was his, how the HOA had built illegally, and how their arrogance had ignored every warning. Some listened with sympathy, others with suspicion. But the truth couldn't be hidden. The records still showed the Whitmore family as the rightful owners. The HOA's claims were built on forged deeds and falsified papers. Karen confronted him. One last time, her pristine appearance gone, clothes soaked in mud. Her voice cracked with fury. "You'll pay for this, Whitmore. You've ruined everything." Jacob met her gaze calmly. "I didn't ruin anything. I just let the water do what it was always meant to do." For the first time, Karen had no answer. Months passed. The valley healed slowly. Grass sprouted where driveways had been. Birds returned, nesting in quiet trees. The water settled, calm and steady, feeding the land as it once had. Jacob stood on the dam, overlooking the reservoir. His grandfather's legacy had survived, not as a place of suburban control, but as a reminder of respect. The HOA was gone, dissolved in lawsuits and debts. The families moved away, bitter but powerless. For Jacob, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. The land was his again, not through force, but through truth and patience. The valley belonged to nature, not to greed. He whispered to the wind, "You were right, Grandpa. The water reclaims." As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the dam glowed in golden light. Jacob knew the valley's story wasn't about loss. It was about resilience. The homes had vanished, but the land remained eternal, cradled once more by the river's flow.